one question, Amy.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, what maybe like, it can be a wrong question for you, but like, this is more like a loan. When it comes to the loan process, like, when it's duplex, the process is different, or if it's like, if the buyer wants to live in one and rent the other one, the process is different for the loan process?
So yeah, so for most duplexes, most lenders are going to run them all as a multifamily housing loan, I believe, like an investment property.
Yeah.
The only one that does not is FHA, I believe. And obviously you double check with a lender on this, but FHA allows for it to be a owner occupied loan if you're going to occupy one of the units up to 4 units. So they'll go up to a fourplex as long as you're going to occupy one of those units. It's an owner occupied purchase versus an investment property. The benefits to that are that, usually for an owner occupied property, you're going to have better interest rates. However, going with FHA, you've got the upfront funding fee, and then you're also going to have mortgage insurance that's on there for the duration of the loan until you refinance it. So there's a couple downsides with FHA versus going like a conventional loan where it may be an investment property purchase and your rate's going to be a little higher because there's higher risk involved with that, regardless of whether you're going to occupy one of them or not. But then if you put, your down payment down, then you don't have your mortgage insurance, or down the road, you can get the mortgage insurance dropped without having to refinance the loan. So there's a couple of little things that come into play there.
Got it. Okay.
But the process is the same overall, like regardless of whether it's an owner occupied or an investment property, it's still the same loan process. You're still going to go through underwriting. You're still going to have to provide details and conditions and stuff, and income and asset documentation for the loan. If they're doing it as an investment property, when they order the appraisal might be more expensive because they might order the appraisal with what's called a rent roll, which says what the average rent is for properties in that area, so that they can account for the rent received as part of the income documentation.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions before we dive in? All right. Today we are jumping in with templates inside CarForms. So I'm going to show you how to set up those templates, right? We talked about what forms we would use for a buyer transaction, what forms we use for a listing transaction. And now I'll show you how you can set those up so that they automatically auto-populate every time you create a listing or purchase transaction, and also auto-populate with like your information in there and KW Vaca Valley and all the stuff that you normally default to. So again, to log into CarForms, you go to car.org. Access realtor secure transactions, the bubble in the middle. We're going to click on that. It's going to take us to another screen where we click over here on Lone Wolf transactions, zip form additions, the yellow button on the left. It's going to then log us into your car if you're not logged in. It's quite the process. And you're going to hit the yellow button again. Just remember yellow, you should be good. You might want to call it orange or gold. I don't really care. Call it whatever you want to, but that's what you're looking for on each of the screens. So continue to transactions. Again, it's going to pop open a new window. So if you have your pop-up blocker on, it may prevent that from happening. So just a heads up on that. Shrink my window down just a little bit so that I can not have faces in the way. All right, so to go into templates, once you're logged in here, we just go up here at the top where it says templates. Okay, blue toolbar across the top, dashboard, forms, transactions, templates. You're gonna click on templates. This will open up a page that has any existing templates that you have in place. So you could edit those templates or you can create new ones. So if you've got one in there and you open it up, it'll give you the ability to go in there and open, edit, do whatever, or we can create a new one. So, and you could create lots of different ones. So we could create like a regular single family listing. So this is a listing template. You might have a vacant land purchase agreement. We might have like a purchase set up for if it was going to be a condo purchase where we have the HOA boxes checked, right? You might have a country property, a regular single family purchase. So there's lots of options that you could have in there to utilize as templates, or you could just have one and then you tweak it just a little bit. So there's no wrong or right answer. To do a new template, we're just going to come up here and hit the new button. And you're going to create, do you want a purchase template or a listing template? So we're going to walk through the purchase template today. So we're just going to click new purchase or offer. You're going to name that template. So I'm going to call mine test purchase so that I can go in there and get rid of it later. And click residential. So we're just going to set this up as a regular residential purchase template. And then down here on the auto apply, you're going to click this middle button here that says automatically apply this template to purchase residential new transactions. Okay, which means that it's going to take this template and apply it to any new purchase transactions that you create as the automatic. Now, if we click automatically and you're going to do like a condo, and let's say you have a secondary template set up for a condo, when you create that transaction, you can go down there and toggle between them. It'll just automatically pick this one, but you can always switch it out. Okay. I'm not going to click that button only because I have my regular one set up. Okay. And then you can, select where you want to put the template, but it goes in my templates. And then you're going to hit save.
Hey, Amy, on your select templates, I don't have that. Is that something after you've already got some that comes up?
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
It could.
Okay.
All right, once we hit save, it opens it up for you and it says, hey, you're currently modifying a purchase template. Click here if you want a new purchase transaction. We want to modify the template. So our first job here is that we are going to add forms. So we're going to come over here to all forms. We want to add to our purchase transaction an RPA. Which is the residential purchase agreement. So we're going to click on that until it turns blue, and it's going to add that one. We want the, this is going to be a purchase transaction. So you probably want your BRE, oops, hold on, which is the buyer representation agreement, because we're going to get that signed first, right? We're going to want a MCA, which is the market conditions advisory. I think I deleted it. Darn it, that's right. We want the SBSA, which is the statewide buyer and seller advisory. And then I also want to add in the WDFA, I think. No, WFDA. The Wildfire Disaster Advisory, the WFDA. Okay. Now, in addition to that, you may decide that you want to add into, like, if most of your business is in Solano County, you may want to add the regional disclosure as well. I oftentimes don't send that out on my purchase transaction. So this is kind of where I like, or you may decide that you want to put in like a contingency removal form. So you have that there, or an SIP form, but it's not necessary because it'll add that per transaction. So it just depends. If you add it in here now, then it would set up your like seller in possession form, how you want it, instead of having to go in there and check boxes every time. So it's just up to you.
Could you like make another template with just those forms?
You could
Okay.
make a second purchase template, like a residential RPA with SIP, right?
Okay.
So that you have that available. And if you were going to do a seller in possession, then you would set that up. Okay. So, and then again, like your options are limitless for the templates, right? So if we go into parties, so I went from documents to parties on the gray toolbar. From here, you could do the selling agent. So remember, you can either be a listing agent or a selling agent. Sometimes that's a little confusing because you think selling agent, the agent selling the listing, but it's not, it is. I mean, it is the agent selling the listing, but it's the one bringing the buyer, not the one listing the property. So we would want to enter in our information here under selling agent or broker. What's the selling agent and broker? So we're going to click on that. And here's where you can put in your name, your license number, the firm name, which be KW Vaca Space Valley. The KW license number 02009421. I wouldn't worry so much about the agent ID, office ID, maybe put in your email that you want them to use. Right. And then you may want to go ahead and put in your phone number. And maybe your cell phone number. Oops, didn't like that one. Not sure exactly what happened there. Oh, now I have the spinning wheel of death. All right, hold on. All right, that looks better. Okay, I
Amy,
wouldn't worry. Yep.
Sorry, are we doing this in the state of the cover sheet? Or is this the same thing?
This is going to auto populate this information to the cover sheet every time you open a purchase transaction.
Oh, got it, got it. Okay, okay, thank you.
Again, I don't utilize the cover sheet very often. Number one, I didn't like the practice of using it with the previous purchase transaction, especially with new agents, because it, I think it's good to read through the purchase agreement and know where that stuff's going instead of filling it out on the cover sheet.
What's the cover sheet?
It allows you to go in there and like put in all the details and then it populates it into the purchase
Oh,
agreement.
Okay, gotcha.
And with the new purchase agreement, I feel like it, it's not necessary.
It's more condensed.
Yeah. It's not, everything's not hidden, but you're welcome to use the cover sheet. I'm not saying you couldn't or shouldn't. It's not my preference. All right, so there's that information. We're gonna hit save. Once you put in, I went ahead and put in KW Vaca Valley's address, which is 312 Cernan Street, Suite D, and then Vacaville, California, 95688. So that all that's in there, and we're gonna hit save. Okay, so now that's in there. So now if I go back to the documents, it's like there are documents to display. Now, if I open up like the market conditions advisory to make sure that that's set up as a template, which it doesn't have a whole lot that needs to be inputted in. We're just going to scroll to the bottom. It doesn't have the buyer's or seller's name because it's a template, right? We haven't chosen who the buyer or seller is. We wouldn't want to put anything in there. So the MCA is all set up and ready to go.
So you could just send that for signatures once you added them in.
Once you add the buyer's name in there, it should be set up and ready to go. Now, I will say that even after I set up my template, I still scroll through before I send out every doc just to make sure everything populated where it was supposed to. It always does. It hasn't ever failed me yet, but the second I don't do it will be the time I send it out for signatures and I'll have somebody's random name in there. I can guarantee it because that's how my life works.
Mine too.
The next one I opened up was just the buyer and seller advisory, the SBSA. On this one, when I scroll down to the last page, there's not anything that goes on this one until page 14. We're just waiting for my computer to catch up. So now see, it's got my information auto-populated into this form, ready to go. Okay. Again, we don't have any of this other information up here. And then on my default, I usually go ahead and check this box here, which is local advisories, and include the Solano County disclosures and disclaimers advisory, because 95% of my business is in Solano County. So I usually just set up my default to go ahead and choose that local disclosure on there. Okay,
Is that just like another form you would add?
it is. Okay. Back. Oh, well, we'll come back to that later. So now I've done the market conditions advisory, the statewide buyer and seller. I'm going to look at the wildfire disaster advisory. Thank goodness they updated this form and you don't have to fill anything in anymore. So it's all ready to go as well. It just needs a buyer's name. All right, and then we're going to look at the buyer representation agreement exclusive. I like to work my way from the easiest forms to the hardest forms when I do anything in here, just in case you're like, Amy, why did you do it that way? That's why. So anytime if we sit down to write an offer or whatever, I always look at the easiest forms first and like warm up. It's like my warm up to like the more complicated forms. So here is the buyer agency disclosure that's attached to the BRE form. We're going to go ahead. I go ahead and check both these boxes for buyer. Even if I only have one buyer in the future, I don't care if both boxes are checked. It really makes no difference. So see, it's auto-populated with my information and those boxes checked. So all we would have to do in the future is just put the buyer's name under parties and it'll auto-populate onto this form. We're going to scroll down to the next one. Also, I encourage you guys, and I'm sure we'll have time, so I'll show you how to do it, but the MLS Connect, I encourage you guys to go in there and mess with it ahead of time because it will pull the listing details over, which is handy. It pulls over the listing agent's information, the property address, the APN, all that information from the MLS. We've been having a little bit of difficulty with it lately, so that's why I recommend going in ahead of time and kind of messing with it a little bit. I think it has to do with how the agent puts it into the system and what system they're using to input it. Is why it's messing up. But here's the Fair Housing Discrimination Advisory. Nothing needs to be inputted on this form for our template. So we're just going to keep scrolling down. And then here is the buyer representation agreement. So we're not going to fill in the buyer's name because we don't have that on a template. It's auto-populated KW Vaca Valley. And it's also, we're not going to put anything in the beginning and the ending date. Just because those are always going to change. Property to be acquired, I'm also not going to fill in anything there on the template because that's going to vary from buyer to buyer. So we're just going to skip past that section. Single agency only, we're not going to check box 2C2I because we represent both buyers and sellers. And we don't do single agency. Right? We allow dual agency. If we check the box for a single agency, just so you know, that doesn't mean you and another agent in our office. That would mean that you can't sell a property that's listed by any agent in our office. It's single agency. Okay? Because any property that's listed by any agent in our office and you representing is dual agency. Yeah. We're not going to check the box here under 2C, 2I either, because that also comes under the single agency. Just like to figure out what the numbers are. Compensation to brokers, here's where I would normally set up a default percent of 2.5% for a buyer transaction. That's usually covered by the sellers. Again, if it's not, we can always cross that bridge when we get there, but that's how I usually set up my BRE is at 2.5%. And then we're going to skip forward. We're not going to auto input the date here because we would do that when we actually have a buyer. And it's set up here under 3B that any additional compensation goes back to the buyer's agent, which means that if the compensation being offered was 3% versus 2.5%, then you would get that extra 0.5%. You can set it up where it's credited to the buyer. So that's up to you. I like money.
Oh no, I'm not saying that.
It's rare that we have any that are 2.5%.
Would that be like a
or that are
mobile
3%.
home? You know, because sometimes they're like 4%.
Sometimes
Yeah.
mobile home or sometimes vacant land.
Okay.
It's usually properties in that lower price range.
Mhm.
Sometimes they offer a higher compensation. Yeah. And then at that point, like, are you really willing to sell a mobile home for $2,500? Or would you like 3,000? No. Right. All right. So broker right to compensation here in this one, I usually fill out 120 days here in the 120 days after the expiration. or any extension, if they enter into contract on one of the properties that I showed them, I'm due the compensation for that. And then I leave it here usually with 3 days after the expiration or cancellation of this agreement. I'm supposed to give them a list of properties. Okay,
Can they cancel this really at any time or no?
they can,
Okay.
they can. And really, would you, right, so you have to allow them to cancel,
Yeah.
but the reality, like, if a
Sure,
buyer
yeah.
wanted to cancel, do you really want to work with a buyer that doesn't want to work with you? It's probably not going to end well.
Right.
But this agreement protects you so
Mhm.
that if they cancel with you to turn around and try to work with the seller directly and go
Mhm.
around you, thinking
Right.
they'll get a better deal, this
And
still
show
allows
them all
you
the properties, yeah.
compensation, yeah. All right. Section G down here is just buyer has not previously entered into representation agreement with any other broker. We're going to assume that's no for the majority of our buyers, so we're not going to fill anything in there. That would be on a case-by-case basis. And we're just going to keep scrolling down here. Buyer obligations, this just says, hey, within 5 days, they're going to work on getting pre-qualified. So we usually leave that in there. I usually don't check any boxes here under other terms and conditions. And then it auto populates my information here at the end of this form. So this is all set up and ready to go. Anytime I had a buyer coming in for a buyer consultation, I could create a new zip forms file, open this up, it's going to be ready to go. I just have to put the buyer's information in.
It's a lot easier.
Hey, Amy,
Yes.
on 8B, shouldn't that be checked, the SBSA, or no?
I usually don't send out the SBSA with the BRE. I usually send it out with my purchase
Oh,
agreement.
later, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. That's right. Okay.
Good question, though. The last form is the buyer investigation advisory. This is just an example for them. See, it says intentionally left blank at the top. It kind of scrolled chunky, but anyways, it doesn't have a property address up there. They'll sign this again with their offer, but this is just an example of all the things that they can have investigated on a property. And then no buyer's names there. So then that sets that one up. Just so everybody knows, you can hit save if you wanted to every time you make a change, but anytime you say back and move out of a form, it automatically saves it for you. It's kind of like Google Docs, right? You don't actually have to save those, they automatically save. So again, we're working towards our most difficult one. So now we're at the top of the, oh, no, I'm just joking. All right, so we're opening up that residential purchase agreement, the RPA form. Don't ask me why it put us on page 3. We don't ask questions, we just,
That's what it did to me too.
yeah, it's got issues. All right,
I
so-
must be special. Mine was on page 5.
oh, nice.
Wow.
All right, so here is our RPA. We make sure the boxes are checked here. Again, I check both boxes for buyer on the agency disclosure, and then you just want to make sure your information is filled out correctly. Keep in mind that it is KW space Vaca space Valley. It's not Keller Williams Vacaville. It's not Keller Williams Vaca Valley. It's not KW Vaca Valley with no space. That's how I do it on everything else with no space, but on our forms, it has to be a space between the words. That is our official DBA. All right, nothing on page 2. That's just all the legal jargon. So we just keep scrolling. We got the Fair Housing Discrimination Advisory. There's not a whole lot to fill out here. Page 1, page 2. Page 2 just gets the buyer's name when we have that buyer in place. And when you go to write an offer on this, when we select this template and we open up a new file, once you put the buyer's name one place or the seller's name one place, it will auto-populate on all the forms like magic. Okay, again, my information's already set and ready to go because I put it into contacts. Super exciting there. The wire fraud and electronic funds transfer, we're not going to put a property address in there. We leave that blank because that'll get edited with each offer. And no names are populated down here. So we're just going to keep scrolling. So now we're on the RPA. We are not going to put in a date prepared at the top because we're not actually preparing this, nor do we put in a buyer's name or a property address or a parcel number here. We just leave those all blank. Here, I usually default to going ahead and checking the seller box for the seller's brokerage firm and the buyer's box for the buyer, because most of my transactions are usually single agency. If it happened to be another Keller Williams, it's really easy to change those boxes, but this way I don't accidentally forget to check those boxes. It's got our information here filled out and the license numbers already completed. So then we just scroll down to the grid. Here's where you're going to put in your default, right? So here's where you could put in, we're not going to put in a purchase price because that's obviously going to vary, but maybe your default, you decide you want to put in 30 days here is going to be my default for my close of escrow, and I can always change it, but at least it's done. My default for the expiration of offer is always going to be 3 calendar days after buyer signature, or maybe I decide that I want to put it, well, you can't do like 24 hours, so we're just going to leave that alone as well. Initial deposit amount, here's where I can come over here and check or and put in buyer to choose. For the buyer to choose the type of method that they're going to deposit those funds by. Otherwise, it defaults to wire transfer. So I always auto-populate that in. Loan amounts, I'm going to leave defaulted with nothing in there because I'm going to edit it per offer. And then we have the VA or FHA check deliver list of lender required repairs. I'm going to leave that set at the default of 17. I'm not going to input anything there. Just so you guys know, I usually match this with the appraisal contingency because that's usually where those repairs come up, is on that appraisal. So oftentimes I make it match my appraisal contingency. Additional amount financed, I'm not going to put anything there. Occupancy type already defaults to primary residence, so we're just going to leave that alone. Seller credit to buyer, most of the time in this market, we're not asking for a seller credit, so we're just going to leave that blank. And then any additional finance terms, which I don't usually have anything in there, so I'm just going to leave that blank. Verification of cash defaults to attach to the offer. Verification of down payment and closing costs defaults to attach to the offer. Verification of loan application is attached to the offer. And I'm going to go ahead and check the box for pre-approval. Okay, so most of the time we are going to attach that lender letter to our offer. I highly recommend also attaching proof of funds with the offer so that they know they have the funds to close escrow or to cover any appraisal gap. If you were selling a property and purchasing a property, then that proof of funds could be the net sheet from the previous property. And most of my buyers are pre-approved. Occasionally we get one that's fully underwritten, pre-approved, at which point I would just change the box. But this way I don't accidentally forget to check something.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of things to check. My final verification of property condition with this new offer, it switched to 5 days prior to close, and I'm going to switch that to 1 to 5 days is going to be my default. And my assignment request, just so everybody knows, I usually make this match the close of escrow, so my default's going to be 30 there. An assignment request would be like, hey, we need to add somebody to the purchase contract or take somebody off for financing purposes. They switched it. It used to just be whenever, and now it's defaulted to 17. So this just opens it up that if any time we can assign this agreement to somebody else. Yeah. My default for my loan is 17. I usually shorten this up to at least 14. Appraisal contingency 14. So that's just, I'm just going to set up my default that way. And then my default property investigation, I'm also going to put 14. And I may decide to shorten these up with the offer, but this is just kind of, I always kind of tighten them up just a little bit.
So it looks a little more appealing.
It does. Informal access to the property. I usually will leave this at 17. Or sometimes I tweak it, like if it's a 30-day close of escrow, I may tweak it to like 25 days so that we have access up to the point that we would do a final walkthrough in case we wanted to go measure or do something like that, make sure a couch or a fridge fits. Just remind your buyer they shouldn't be buying that couch or fridge before the close of escrow. Review of seller documents, I'm probably going to bring that down to 14. I usually have this in physical investigation of property, I usually make the rest of these contingencies match that physical investigation. I don't want to have 20 different deadlines, technically it'd only be 8, in which we're removing stuff. And it just looks nicer if they all match. So I usually match those, all the ones in section from L3 down usually match. Okay. Any questions so far?
Would this,
Yeah.
sorry, that one is just if they're gonna have no contingencies, right?
This one's just if they're going to remove any of
Oh,
these
one of
contingencies
these.
from L3 to L7 with the offer.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've already reviewed all of the seller documents, they had a preliminary title in their disclosure package, they had the HOA docs in there, at least in lien, then you could remove just those versus the investigation,
Got it.
or you could remove all of those. But yeah,
Okay.
you would specify that on the contingency removal form.
Amy,
If you
on
check
eight-
the, what?
Sorry, on L8, the sale of buyer's property is not contingency unless checked here. What happens if you don't check that? And
Then it's not contingent on the sale of a buyer's property. So
Okay.
as it stands right now, this purchase is not contingent on the buyer selling a property. So we would only
Got
check that box if we're gonna use the COP form.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep,
Okay, then
Um,
Amy, you
yes.
had, I'm sorry, you had said something up on E about something about the days should match, but you didn't mark something. I think you said if it,
Oh.
what were you saying? If
Yeah, so-
something was there, then what?
so up here on section E1, the FHA VA lender required repairs. If it was gonna be VA or FHA financing, I would have this number here match my appraisal contingency.
What number should, just put your scuba over again?
E1 should match L2
Oh, E1 and L2.
if it's a
E1.
VA or FHA offer.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I don't set that to default fill in, mainly because if it's a conventional offer, I don't want to muddy it with something there that shouldn't be there.
Okay.
Right, don't add it unless it's. for the
Yeah.
days.
E1 and LA, you said? A1.
E1,
Oh my God.
E1 and L2.
Oh, I wrote LA, L2.
I know.
Okay.
E1 and
Okay.
L2.
Thank you.
Yep. And if you check any of these boxes when you're doing your offer, just so you know the no loan contingency or no appraisal contingency, you don't necessarily need to also include a contingency removal form for those. Checking those boxes is saying that it's removed,
Okay.
but we're not going to default those boxes. All right, just like I wouldn't default this L8 either, the car form COP, the contingency for the sale of the buyer's property. Most of my buyers, I'm going to assume, are not contingent. And then we'll check that box when it comes due. And if you do check that box as you're filling out the offer, it will auto populate the COP form into your file for you. Just like if you check this CR attached, it'll auto populate the contingency removal form into your file for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Time of possession, I like the new contract where it defaults to upon notice of recordation. So I usually just leave that
Yeah.
alone in my my template.
Mhm.
We just leave that there. And then if obviously if it was tenant occupied or we wanted to change it, they were going to stay after the close of escrow, we would make those adjustments per the offer. Seller delivery of documents, I usually leave these defaulted to 7, 5, 3, and 7 because this isn't going to hurt me. Oh, I do change this one. Hold on, we'll come back. So N1 through N3, I usually leave those just at the default. Even if I said, hey, we're going to remove the review of seller disclosures in 10 days and the seller has 7 days to give it to me, if they delay and wait until day 7, I've got another 5 days. I actually have till day 12 to remove that contingency if I haven't received all of the fully executed seller disclosures yet. So it just works in my favor if they delay. I
Did you
don't.
have time to review.
Yeah. So I usually don't tighten these up. The only time I might tighten these up is, let's say the property was in like really poor condition. And I really wanted to try to get those seller disclosures before we wasted money on inspections or appraisals. Then I might tighten it up to get them right away if they didn't have them available already. But for my default template, I just leave those alone. Install smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and water heater bracing. I would say it would be good practice to tighten this up to like 3 days after acceptance, because that ensures those items are done before the appraiser comes into the property. The appraiser is going to be the one that calls those items. And if the appraiser calls missing smoke detectors or water heater bracing or carbon monoxide, then the appraiser has to come back out to re-inspect the property, which could delay the close of escrow, and it's also going to charge an additional fee that's going to have to get covered by somebody. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I usually tighten that one up to about 3 days. Okay.
Like, does the agent read that and like tell them? I'm
They
just
should.
curious. Yeah,
They
like
should.
in general.
Yeah. Most agents now are pretty good
Okay.
at making sure that's done. And I usually double check it when I go through and do my Avid.
Okay.
Those are some
okay.
things that I look for, like, do we have smoke detectors and is the water heater
Perfect.
double strapped? Or do I need to mention that to the agent?
Right. Okay.
Okay. Items included in the sale, I usually go ahead and default to check the stove because that always comes with properties in California. I usually don't default, well, we could default, most microwaves are built in, although there are some properties that don't have built-in microwaves. And if they don't have built-in microwaves, you probably want them to leave that microwave behind anyways. And then most of the other things I don't go ahead and automatically check because it's going to vary from, check dishwasher. It's going to vary from property to property. Was there a video doorbell? I don't like checking boxes where there wasn't something there. So I usually like minimal here in this area as far as things that get checked.
With like a country property, would you include like the panels and the mats and stuff like that in the additional items, or?
I probably would include that stuff because there's no guarantee that stuff will stay with country property.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, allocation of cost, the NHD report gets paid for by the seller. And I usually ask for the environmental report and any more under the provider. I usually go in here and put seller to choose. Don't put seller's choice. It's an actual company. I know I've said that like 6,000 times, but people still, our agents don't, but other agents still put seller's choice.
Now you have to use seller's choice.
You're required to use seller's choice or do an amendment to the agreement or counter it to change the NHD provider. So seller to choose. Okay, it's really there to protect the seller. We want to make sure we're getting the information as the buyer, but it's really like for me to choose who the seller is going to choose to disclose that information for them seems wrong. Most of the time the sellers already have them ordered anymore. And so that's why I usually put seller to choose. I'm not going to fill in any information for these additional reports here. My seller is going to pay for the smoke alarm, carbon monoxide detector, and water heater bracing. They're required by the state of California to do so. You could, if you're trying to be super competitive, be like, hey, buyer will take care of that. Buyer will take care of that. Buyer, right? Buyer can pay for everything, but in the state of California, it's considered typical for the seller to pay for the NHD and the seller to pay for those those items as well, because it's a point of sale requirement. Here in this next section, government required point of sale inspections and reports. I usually don't check these boxes. And point of sale corrective or remedial actions. Know where you're selling property or buying property, because there are, like in Solano County, there's not very many point of sale requirements outside of what we've already checked. But if you go into like Davis or the Bay Area, now we've got reports and inspections that are point of sale that have to be done. So you want to make sure you know who normally pays for those and check those boxes. But on my template, I don't normally fill those out. Escrow fees and title, again, I don't normally fill this out. In like Vacaville, it's typical for the buyer to pay the title and escrow fees currently. Sometimes this changes. It used to not be the buyer. It's shifted over time. Really what caused it to shift was more so like all the foreclosures and everything, because the banks didn't want to pay for anything.
If you didn't check that, and after it's accepted, you guys just figure out like who pays it.
Yeah, so I believe I feel like they changed it, but yeah, you would need to do an addendum
And
to
then
clarify who
who's
is changing it.
Okay.
Or if you check this box here for each to pay their own, the title company is going to look at that and be like, I don't know what you guys mean by that.
Right.
So you'll have to do an addendum to clarify that. For the most part, my escrow holder is ORTC. Vacaville. See if that fits.
Why wouldn't you mark both to split the escrow fees?
Yeah, if you were going to split, you would mark both. So if you marked both, it's assumed that they're gonna split it 50-50. You don't have to fill that in. But in this market, it's typical that the buyer pays title and escrow in Vacaville, at least in most of Solano County. You just wouldn't check the each to pay their own. There's only one escrow fee with the transaction in Northern California.
Mm.
Southern California is weird. All right. We won't talk about Southern California. The county transfer tax is generally paid for by the seller. So you could check that box if you wanted to, right? Depending on where you do most of your business. In fact, I think on my template, I actually do have these checked as buyer, and then seller, because again, most of my business is in Solano County and most of it's in Vacaville. City transfer tax, we don't have city transfer tax in most of Solano County, so I oftentimes don't check that box, especially on my template. Vallejo has a city transfer tax, and as you venture further into like Sacramento County or Yolo or down to the Bay Area, those do. And so I would do that as a transaction by transaction, so I'm not going to set it up in my template. And same thing too with the HOA documents and private transfer fees. I'm not going to mark anything there because most of the properties that we put offers on don't have HOA fees. So we would take that on a case by case basis, or you could set up a separate template with HOA.
Like a condo one.
Yeah. The reason that I don't just default and check those boxes is as a listing agent, if I've got an offer that comes through with all these boxes checked, I'm gonna be like, this agent has no idea what they're doing or where they're buying a house. They're not familiar with the area because they don't even realize there's not an HOA or city transfer tax, right? So I want to look intelligent to the other agent. So that's why we don't check boxes where it doesn't apply. That's just my take as a listing agent.
Makes sense.
Down here, additional fees and costs. I don't usually check that. Home warranty, I may go ahead and check that, hey, we want the seller to pay for that. I think my default that I have set up is $540. And I could always change this later on. Here's where I'd go like value plus with first class sellers coverage. Oops. And then this is where we would select our default. I don't think that's what it is. I don't know who I use. All right, there we go. So I would set that up as the default, and I could always go in there and change the boxes depending on the offer. And then other terms, I don't have anything that I would default in other terms. That's where you'd put like an appraisal guarantee or something, but that's going to vary offer to offer, buyer to buyer. So I don't normally fill that in. And then that takes us basically to the end of the grid.
Hey,
Other
Amy.
Yep.
Q5 and Q6, the, inspections reports, I know you said like they differ during our per county, but for Solano County, you said there is none.
There are no
So
government required point of sale inspections or reports.
So typically we would be blank then, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, when we're filling it out. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so section 4 is property addendum. So here is where you can, and you don't have to check these boxes. So you may want to default that, hey, I always include the WDFA. I always include the statewide buyer and seller advisory, along with the other things that are there. There's not a box for the market conditions advisory, and it doesn't have to be attached to this purchase agreement. So this is just if we're going to make them part. So it doesn't matter whether you check those boxes or not, but you could. You're always going to include those. The ones that come into play here are the ones that affect the buyer's desirability to purchase the property, right? So if we're going to attach an addendum that clarifies what items are included in the sale of the property, maybe like Anastasia mentioned, maybe it's a country property and there's a whole list of items that needed to be included, then we might attach here addendum number 1. We check this box and fill it out there. So this is really, or if like, right, if it's a tenant occupied property, then we may want the TOPA or backup offer addendum or the septic well and property monument. So if it's something that's going to affect the acceptance of the contract, we want it marked in and put in here. The only one that sometimes I don't mark and I include it would be the septic well and property monument, because If that's checked, then the lender's gonna wanna see those reports. And if the septic doesn't pass and the buyer still wants to purchase a property, that's gonna be an issue.
So you would just get the report but not check the box?
Yeah, I would include this document, but not actually check the box.
Got it.
All right. Then we're just gonna kind of scroll to the last page because with the new purchase agreement, there's nothing that gets filled in the middle anymore. There's no hidden items, which is fabulous for buyers, bad for sellers. No, I'm joking. We used to be able to like hide stuff in random spots and people would miss it.
Amy, I missed the first part of this and I wish I had been on. I'm sorry. It is recorded, I know. Will it be easy to find in all the recordings?
It will be easy to find. Abby usually has it posted the same day on the sheet and it'll be listed as setting up a purchase template in car forms
Okay,
or
thank you.
purchase templates, because we're not gonna go into the listing. We're not gonna make it to the listing template today. Oh, hold on. It's so choppy. All right, so here
Is
on
she-
page,
Is Avi staying after you? Is she gonna help
She's-
out the new productivity coach?
no, she's mine.
Stop being greedy and share her.
No.
You can't
Nice
take
try.
her, you can't take her with you.
I am taking her with me
What?
forever and ever.
Oh my gosh.
She helps me with lots of things outside of just PC stuff. All right. She keeps me sane. She's not going anywhere. All right. Here it's auto-populated my information. You probably want to designate and put in your template the electronic delivery email address. And you probably want to also go ahead and specify in the phone number here. There you go. And then it's got the address populated there. Nothing else will be automatically populated because we don't have that information. It varies from offer to offer. Same with the property address on the buyer's investigation advisory. And that brings us, oh, we have the Consumer Privacy Act
Mhm.
here, which also doesn't have anything auto-populated because that'll do it once you put in the buyer's name. So then once you've got your template set up how you want it, you've got all those documents in there, then you just hit save if you want to, or we just hit back. Right? It's gonna save it either way.
The other day, it didn't save something. I clicked
Did it not?
and I hit that, but it could have been my internet.
It could have been your internet.
Then I was like, save, save, save.
Is it gonna go back? No. Now it's probably gonna go back too far. All right, so here's our template. It's already ready to go. And now that will be available for you when you go to create a new purchase transaction. It'll automatically take this template and apply it to that new purchase transaction. All those things, all those boxes that we checked and information that we filled out will all be in there already.
So we just go in there, click on that one and then save it as whoever our client is.
Nope, all you have to do now is we just hit, we're here at the, get out of the template, so we're back to like our transactions. We hit from transactions, you hit new transaction. Stop trying to get me to, oh, no, no, go away. Fail,
Uh-oh.
all right, we're just gonna hit new once we're in transactions. You're gonna hit new purchase or offer. And then when it takes you to this screen where you're gonna name it and select, once you select residential, it's gonna automatically apply that template for you down here. So you're gonna name it
Mhm.
whoever the purchase is and it'll automatically apply. Now, if you had more templates here, you can click on it. This is where you could toggle between like a condo or one that had a seller in possession addendum factored into it. You could toggle between those, but it'll always choose this default one. And then you hit save. Once you hit save, it's gonna open up that new contract with everything completed and ready to go. Now, the other one that you can do here is from this screen when you go to create a new one. Go in here and mess with your MLS Connect. Because this is what'll pull in all of the listing agents information and the property. So make sure that you've got this set up and ready to go and saved in here with your username and password, so you don't have to look it up and find it. And then once you have that, if we were opening a new file, we would go into the MLS and get the MLS ID, check the little box for include property photo and hit find. And it's going to search the MLS for that MLS ID. It'll appear a little photo here of the property. You're going to say, yes, that's the right one. And then you're going to hit use listing.
And then we'll add all that stuff.
It'll add all the information for that listing. Now, the problem that we're having, I think the main problem is that because it's now Barry's Plus, it's not gonna pull over information for other MLSs. So if
Right.
it was a property that was entered into Metro List, it's not gonna
Mhm.
pull those details over, is I think where we're having that issue. And we've got a lot of agents that are kind of crossing borders.
Right.
And so you may have problems pulling that listing over if you look at the agent and they're an out of area agent.
Oh, they're
But you
in
can try it,
Metro
yeah.
List.
So
You just manually enter it.
you just manually enter it. It takes a lot of time and energy, but you
More
can
work.
do it. Yeah, that's where that cover sheet might come into play because you can enter in all the property information. But yeah, so go in there and play with this, create a fake file and try pulling over a few MLS IDs and a couple properties over it. And like for the purchase transaction, like I'm going to set this up for Tara, who's my buyer, and then we're going to write an offer on a property that's going to get rejected, and we're going to come back and write a new one. I'm not going to go in there and create a new file. I'm just going to come in here, click MLS Connect,
Mhm.
pick the new property. It'll ask, do you want to override all the information? I'm going to say yes.
Oh, so it's
And
the
then it's
same offer.
It's going to override everything, and then I just make sure all the information's updated and the dates are updated, and we call it a day.
That seems a
That
lot
is
easier.
important to know because I have a ton of offers written. So this keeps it clean.
That keeps it clean. And
Oh.
if you're like, well, how does that work? Well, then if we come down here to like an offer, I think there was more than one written here, but let's look. What happens is once you send it out for DocuSign,
Mhm.
when we go into documents,
Mm.
you're like, Amy, you're overwriting the offer. How do we have history of it? Well, every time you send something out for signature, it creates a folder for that with all the signed documents in it. So even though I've overridden this with a second offer, it still has my signed documents saved here for the rejected offer. So we have a record of that.
Hmm,
Can you
okay.
go back and click where you go onto the
Yeah, do
MLS?
it again. I know.
So there's a couple different ways to do it. So I could do it from right here. If I forgot and opened the file up, I could just click this little MLS Connect button right here. I'm going to click this record connect here in a minute and see where that takes me. So that pulls up that same window. Where I did it originally was when I created the new purchase transaction. As I was putting in the name that I was going to save it and what template, there was an MLS Connect button there as well. So there's multiple places where you can use that MLS Connect. But once you've saved an offer, you've written it up, sent it out for signatures, now we're writing a new one, you would do it from here inside the Documents tab where it's got the MLS Connect.
On that transaction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, once that transaction's open, that's how you would override it. I'm just curious, I'm gonna click Record Connect and see where it takes me. Oh, no,
You have to pay for
you
it.
have to pay for it. That's what I was thinking, but I thought I would check.
Mm.
So MLS Connect is where it's at.
Okay,
it's
so if-
right there.
Amy, so just to make sure, so when we're making an offer, we're in the person's, whatever, Susie's file. We
Yep.
click MLS Connect. We had one that was rejected. So now we just wipe out the MLS number and then put the new number in and overwrite it. And then it
Yep, just-
saves, okay. Okay.
Yep,
and
put the
check
new
everything.
number in there, hit include property photo, hit find. The reason I like the property photo is that you know you've chosen the right one based on how it looks.
Right?
You got the number right, even though it says the address and everything in there as well, but it's really easy to glance. And then it makes it cute because it's got the photo. And then it'll say, do you want to override the existing data? You hit yes, and then you hit save.
Okay. Sometimes I'm noticing a lot of these photos aren't looking like the houses. It's like we roll up and you're like, this looked really cute. And I don't know what day they took this picture on, but this is not. My client is like, Heather, my house looked exactly like our pictures, didn't it? And I was like, yes. And she's like, why does this one look like trash? And the pictures make it look like it's like
Bait and
Oprah's
switch.
house.
Bait and switch. You know, and that's really the worst thing you can do for your listing is make it look
Yeah.
significantly better in the photos than it does in person, because then you're being disappointed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is horrible.
So I would
like,
rather in the pictures it look a little smaller, or the yard look a little
Yeah.
smaller, the kitchen, so that when somebody walked in, they go, oh my gosh, this is a lot
Mhm.
bigger than it looked, right? We got them through the
Mhm.
door, and now they've kind of got that wow factor instead of that feeling of disappointment. But so
Yeah.
see, I just did this one that was already in here. I clicked include, hit find, so now I've got a little picture there, and then you just hit save.
Oh, that looks cute house.
And then
Oh,
it says, do you
okay.
want to replace existing data with imported data? We hit yes. And then there we go. And now when you go to log in, like on your, we'll go to statewide buyer and seller advisory. Now it's got the other agents' information listed in here. And it'll also pull over the
Ah.
property address information as well, which I think is
Nice.
not on this one.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm struggling with it keeping my information, my license, my email in there when you go into parties. I keep having to fill it out.
So if you set it up under the templates, it should save it. And if you, once you're in here in the transaction, it should be okay. So once you like hand key somebody in here so it's different. Well, it should still. you
No,
just
I
wanna
have
make-
it like that and it's not keeping it for some reason.
Well, it doesn't like you.
I know.
One way that you might want to try doing it is I think it allows you to save as a contact. Make sure
Oh,
that
I'll try
box
that.
is checked and hit save so that it keeps you in the system. That might make a difference.
Okay, okay.
I can't make a guarantee, but we can always look at it next time we sit down and see if we can figure out what's going on with yours.
So do you add these
Thank you.
people after acceptance too?
So,
Like your escrow office, or do you just add them in the beginning?
I don't add the escrow office. This is
Oh,
just
okay.
added because I put somebody in that line.
Oh,
on the
okay.
offer.
Oh, so you don't send it out for signatures or anything? Okay, got
No,
it.
and this, because we chose NHD as
On
the
that one.
disclosure and the home
Got it.
warranty, it automatically
Just added
populates
these
these.
parties. Okay,
Yep, I do add the seller in, so when I'm writing the offer, I do go to the MLS, click on the tax, the APN number and input the seller's
Got
names
it,
in there.
okay.
Or if there's documents uploaded by the other side, then I usually double check it with their documents to make sure I've got what they've got for the buyer or seller.
because for your signing side, you're just gonna do your buyer and you pretty much.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. okay.
Yep. But I do want, the other things just get populated as
Got
it
it.
gets entered into the forms. All right, any other questions? All right,